You can believe me or not, but the stories I'm about to tell you are true. I never really believed in ghosts when I was little. My mother told me they were made up by people a long time ago, and I believed it until I stayed a night in my neighbor's house up the street. The Smiths, we'll call them, had a beautiful colonial-style house which dated back to the late 1700s. I guess a lot of interesting events occurred there. The house was apparently owned by a wealthy family, including a house across the street. The Smiths' house had been used as a servant home, while the house across the street was the main mansion. Anyway, one day in the late 1900s, a man named Edward was working in a barn with a piece of machinery. Suddenly, he lost control of the machine. His arm got caught inside, and it tore it off. For hours, he laid in the barn bleeding and crying for help, but no one saved him until it was too late. Supposedly, his ghost haunts the Smiths' house. So, now the story begins. In Rhode Island, in 1987, I was about 6 years old, but I was well aware of my surroundings. My parents were going on vacation, and my sister and I were to stay at the Smiths' house. It was especially crowded this particular night because their relatives from West Virginia were spending the night also. At about 5 o'clock, we all had dinner. Afterwards, we all played like little kids do, and finally, we all got together to settle down to go to sleep. Since there were a lack of rooms, one of the Smith's sons, John, and I had to sleep in the attic. Their attic wasn't the stereotypical spooky attic. One half of it was made for occupation, and the other half was for storage. John and I settled on the floor with our sleeping bags, and within 10 minutes, we were fast asleep. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up. Forgetting where I was, I looked around the room until I realized where I was sleeping. Slowly, I looked to the right to see if John was sleeping. He was. Then I looked up at the doorway to the other half of the attic, and what I saw, I'll never forget. In the darkness was a dark figure with an incredibly light face, crouching down in the doorway. The face was so white, it looked like a mask. It looked like his head was just floating there, without a body. I became so frightened, and I couldn't move. The only movements the figure made was the blinking of his eyes. Suddenly, I threw my blankets over my head and screamed for help while I cried uncontrollably. It must have been 10 minutes before Mrs. Smith ascended the attic stairs in a rush to see what had startled me. I told her I needed to go home, but I was stuck at the Smiths. Mrs. Smith's only resolution was to put me to sleep with my sister. So, the rest of the night, I slept with my sister safely. Some people I know told me that I probably just saw things since I was young and still questioning everything around me, but I wasn't the only one who saw things there. Miss Smith had many experiences with the entity. One night, while the rest of her family was away in Cape Cod, she got ready to go to sleep. Before she fell asleep, she decided to read the rest of one of her books. While she was reading, she looked up at her bedroom door. She became immediately startled at what she saw. There was a man in clothing that looked old-fashioned, standing in the doorway, just staring at her. Slowly, she got herself together and asked the man what he wanted. Without a word, he turned around and walked down the hallway and into the wall, disappearing. Miss Smith, scared out of her mind, ran down to her house for some comfort. Another time, Miss Smith had an incredibly strange dream. In her dream, she was walking around her house aimlessly. She opened her front door and walked around the perimeter. As she turned a corner to where there was a black stairwell that led to a deck, she saw an old man standing on the steps, repeating the word "here" and pointing to the stairs. Miss Smith then woke up and thought nothing of the dream, but during the day, she started to clean the house. She stood at the bottom of the stairs and started to walk up. As she looked up, she saw a window in the room, and she was walking up to it. As she walked closer, she could see a face pressed against the window. It was the old man that she dreamt about. Miss Smith couldn't believe it. She just stood on the stairs and watched him. He was mouthing something through the glass, but she couldn't make it out. It was like he was trying to talk to her. Naturally, she ran downstairs and stayed there. But even stranger about that was that the window was on a second-story window. Another story about the Smith's house was told to me by accident by a girl named Jen who used to live up the street from me. She told me that one Halloween, her sister, and her mother went trick-or-treating up the street. They reached the Smith's house. You would always get excited when you reached the Smith house because they put on the most frightening haunted houses. So, Jen, her mother and sister all went up to the Smith's front door. All the lights in the house were out, but the front door was wide open. Thinking it was part of the haunted house, they went in. The living room was completely dark and the house was silent, but within a few seconds, commotion began directly upstairs. Jen and her family heard ghostly laughter, whispering, and crying. They also heard things rolling on the floor above, and a ball bounce until it bounced down the stairs, straight ahead of them. They were scared, the way you're scared on Halloween, but all of that changed. Soon after the ball, a figure in the darkness fell down the stairway, screaming. The figure just wasn't sliding down, it was flipping over on its head, smashing itself into the banister, and just damaging itself. After its fall, the figure just laid at the foot of the stairs, completely silent. Jen, her mother and sister all ran from the house screaming, not knowing if what they saw was real or fake. But the next week, the Smiths announced that they were in New Jersey visiting relatives. The figure they saw was not one of the Smiths. Other things have happened here, but they were all small. Everything from nightly whispering to loud thumping and crashes. There have been other witnesses to the events at the Smith's house, but no one knows why the house is haunted. People think that Edward is the ghost that haunts, but the visions everyone saw didn't fit his description. The hauntings still continue today, but they're not as extreme as they were before. When I was growing up, I've had several experiences which led me to believe the house was haunted. First, I was about 6 years old. I was lying in bed, just about to fall asleep, when I heard what I thought was laughing. I turned over to tell my sister to be quiet when I saw a black form floating beside my bed. My sister was sound asleep. This form had no legs that I could see. It did have a smile on what I call its face. The next encounter did not happen until I was 16. I was coming home late one night and came face to face with this thing. It was the same thing I saw when I was 6, only this time there was no smile. After an indiscernible amount of time, I ran to my room. I've had several encounters with this thing throughout my teenage years and began calling it Paul. Don't ask me why, because I don't know myself. My sister and brothers claim they've never saw it, but one brother says he's had a haunting experience, such as things floating in his room. My mother says she knows the house is haunted, but she refused to give any examples. I know this thing was not harmful, because nothing harmful ever happened. I also came to feel that this thing was protective of us, because I never felt alone and afraid in the house when I was alone. Whenever something was going to happen, we were given warning signs, such as popping noises on the stove that we found out had a gas leak, and uneasy feelings using the garbage disposal that checked out to have a barbed wire that electricians said could have caused a fire. This is my story. Hope it wasn't too long. From the time I was 4 until I was about 16, my grandparents lived in a house on Cloverdale Road that had a poltergeist in it. I lived with them for the first 4 years, then moved out with my mother, but even after we moved, I would spend weekends or holidays at my grandparents' house. The happenings were noticed by everyone in the family. My grandfather was the only one who never said anything out of the ordinary. He's a staunch man of God and kept pictures of Jesus around, and he prayed daily to bless our house and everyone in it. The house had a sunroom that was added on the second floor, over the front porch. This became my room. The wall between my bedroom and the master bedroom, where my mother slept, was brick and had two small windows on either side of the door. I had to walk through a room to get to the upstairs hall, where there was a door leading to the middle room, always dark because the only window was 2 feet from the house next door. In the back of the upstairs had a small kitchen over the top of the one on the first floor, and a bathroom at the very back over the top of my grandparents' room on the first floor. The downstairs had a living and dining room combination that was curtained off. The front room was a bedroom, the middle the dining room, and the stairs to the basement went down at the doorway to the kitchen. Beyond was my grandparents' room, as I mentioned. My grandparents, my mother, my aunt and myself all lived there at once. My aunts were teenagers and experimenting with the occult and spirit invocations. I really think this had a lot to do with everything. At their age, they couldn't have understood the consequences of what they were asking. You could clearly hear the footsteps in the middle room, even during the day, and then find out later that my aunt wasn't home. So many things got moved around in Susan's middle room that she put a lock on her door, but it wasn't any of us. We heard walking, someone laying down heavily in the bed, drawers opening and closing, the closet opening and closing, not loud or frightening, just the normal noises Susan's would have made if she was there. Many times, when I was very young, I'd scamper up the stairs, convinced she was there and wanting to play with her. When I got there, the door would be locked and no one would answer me when I knocked. Once I even saw that the light was on in her room. It was shining around the door. I called to her and tried to open it, but it went out and the noises stopped. My scalp would tingle with fear, and I'd run crying to my grandmother and tell her what happened. Once, when I was about 5 or 6, I got up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. My room was awash with street lamp light, but my mother's, with no other windows, was very dark. I had to go slowly, even though I was dying to go into the bathroom, because I didn't want to crash into something and wake her up. When I got there, I was just flushing and was suddenly possessed, no pun intended, with the most abject horror for no apparent reason. I screamed and I screamed. I ran all the way from the bathroom past my mother, who was struggling to get up, into my room and under my blankets. I was trembling and pale and shaking. It woke the whole house up, and it took me hours to calm down and sleep, with the light on, of course. I never knew what had set me off, just blind panic. Our pots and pans could be heard falling out of cupboards, and when you'd go check, everything would be in place, except maybe one thing, and that would turn up days or weeks later. My mother saw a black shadow about 2 to 3 feet high at the foot of her bed when she wake up in the middle of the night. One day, it waited until she was awake, then slowly, deliberately, came around the side of the bed and advanced towards her head. She prayed fervently while it just stayed there, then mysteriously, it faded away. The odd thing is, it would always come back another night. She was the only one who saw anything. The rest of us just heard disturbances. I was playing with my toys one sunny day, in my room. I was about 7 at the time. I picked up a bunting bag, sort of like a baby sleeper, but like a gown sewed closed at the bottom instead of 2 legs, and also the ends of the sleeves are sewn closed, and it had a hood. It was made of flannel and had flowers on it. I loved putting my baby dolls in it. It fit the ones that were about 12 inches high. I had a doll prepared to put in it, and reached for the flannel bag on the floor next to me. Then I shrieked and jumped up, flinging it away from me. I could feel that there was something, felt like a gardener snake or 2, writhing inside of it and making a buzzing noise like the world's biggest housefly or bee. I stared at it in horror as it lay on the floor and the writhing could be seen. Then the noise died down, and as it did so, the shapes quit squirming and went flat. I was screaming for help. My mother and aunt came upstairs, and I told them what happened. I was sobbing so hard they could barely understand me. They picked it up even though I screamed and begged them not to and looked inside. There was nothing. The only way out, if something was in there, was through the neck hole, and it was lying face up a couple of feet from me, and I had not taken my eyes off it for anything. They searched the room and found absolutely nothing. They said I imagined it and took me downstairs to have juice to drink. I swear I never played with it ever again. I put that thing in the bottom of a box and left a pile of heavy toys on top of it. The house still stands, and when we left, none of those things ever followed us. I wonder what else has happened there over the last 20 years. This story took place in a house that me and my family lived in when I was a little girl. The house is over 100 years old, and when we moved in, my father had to do a lot of work on it. While tearing out a wall, separating the kitchen and stairway leading upstairs, he found an old necklace hanging on a board inside the wall. We took the necklace to a jeweler because there was writing on the clasp. The jeweler told us that the stamp on the clasp was from an old jeweler in Ireland, dating back at least 100 years. He also said that it was an old custom back then to hide something in the structure of newly built houses to bring good luck to the owners and keep bad spirits away. My father gave me the necklace when we sold the house some years later. Well, anyway, to get to the point of the story, after finding the necklace and finishing the work in the house, some family members started hearing things when one of us were in the house alone. At first, we just chalked it up to noises in an old house, but there was this one bedroom upstairs, the only bedroom on the backside of the house. Well, my father didn't get to fixing that room up right away because it was always so cold in there, so he used it for a storage room for many years, until my mother got the great idea to redo the room for me. Well, she put shag carpet in it and beads on the closet door. You know, it's a teenager's room. That room always kinda gave me the creeps for some reason, but to please my mother, I made it my domain. When I would be sleeping in the middle of the night, I would wake up and have this great feeling that there was something in there with me. I would go running into my sister's room as fast as I could in the pitch dark, and as I was running, I would hear my name being whispered in my ear in a long, dragged out manner. I don't mind telling you, it scared the hell out of me. I started sleeping with my sister more and more until I just couldn't use the room at all. Later on, my mother started caring for some elderly people, and she gave my room to one of the women named Marie. She always slept with the door shut at night because some of the other ladies would snore and keep her awake. One morning at breakfast, she was complaining that she didn't get too much sleep due to the snoring. My mother asked her, why didn't you close your door, as you always have? She said, well, Miss Clunch, I didn't want to say anything, but sometimes I hear voices in the room at night. Not long after that, I was sleeping in my sister's room when I heard this young woman's voice singing this happy kind of lullaby in the hallway. It was loud too. It woke me out of a sound sleep. The next thing I know, I hear my door start squeaking open, and my heart was racing. It was my mother. She popped her head in and asked me if I heard that too. She checked all the women, and they were sound asleep. We started asking around to some of the old neighbors, and found out that a young woman, a relative of one of the neighbors, had died in that very room during childbirth. We still continued to hear stuff in the house, but were not as afraid as we were before. I felt sorry for the lost soul. She must be looking for her child. That's it. It's kinda long, but oh well. Thanks for reading this story. Some years ago, I lived in a 3-story house in Penzance, UK. The house is about 100 years old, granite construction in a terrace of 11 houses. The house had 5 bedrooms, 2 of which were on the top floor, i.e. attic bedrooms. One overlooked the front of the house and the other the back. My brother, who was a couple of years younger than me, claimed the front bedroom as his own. A few years later, he married and left home. I had a bedroom at the back of the house, on the next floor down. One night, my girlfriend slept over in the front attic bedroom. At the same time, our neighbor's daughter and her friend slept over in another spare bedroom. In the very early hours of the morning, my girlfriend heard someone at her bedroom door. It was as though someone was trying to open the door, finding it locked or stuck, and then using more and more force to try and open it. The sound stopped abruptly, at which point, my girlfriend grabbed her bed, clothes, and ran down the stairs and spent the rest of the night with the neighbor's daughter and friend. She staunchly refused to sleep in the room again, even refusing to go back up to get her clothes the next morning. Sometime later, I moved into the attic bedroom myself and experienced the same manifestation. However, there was just the one occasion. It was just as my girlfriend had reported. The door sounded as though someone was trying to force it open. The noise was sufficient to wake me, and although it was somewhere around 12 to 1 o'clock in the morning, there was sufficient light from a street light outside for me to see that the door was open. It was exactly as I left it when I went to bed. An interesting sequel to this story is that a few years later, when most of the family had married and left home, my parents sold the house to move to a smaller cottage nearby. One morning, my mother was returning from the local shop when she met the lady whose attic bedroom adjoined the one in question. After the usual pleasantries, the neighbor said that something strange had happened a few days earlier. She'd been in her main bedroom, which was directly below her attic bedroom, when she heard footsteps on bare floorboards walk from our attic bedroom across into her attic bedroom. Our attic bedroom had been carpeted, and although my parents had sold the property, the new owners at the time hadn't moved in, as they were still in the process of selling their property. Hey everybody, first of all, I just wanted to ask you guys a question. Is it writhing or writhing? If I say writhing, it sounds all theatrical, and I sound like I have a purpose, but if I said writhing, it's just like, we got like a writhing rocking down the street, and that's all we have. Like, we have like these two writhings, battling it out to see if people can, enjoy themselves and have a good time. I have no idea what I'm talking about. I have this weird image of noodles going down the street and having a good time, and that's what I'm picturing in my head when I hear writhing. I have no idea why, guys. I have no idea. Like, straight up macaroni noodles, just walking, like just one and one, like together, and just like, being the best, noodles that could walk down the street that you could ever see. You'll probably see that in Hollywood. I'm sure you do. So anybody live in the Hollywood area, Los Angeles, let me know if that happens down there, because I'm pretty sure that happens. And if you've been there before, let me see your videos and I'll put it as like ghost stories or something. I don't know, guys. I don't even know what I'm talking about. I'm slurring my words. I'm messing up. I'm, awkward as hell. But in the end, it doesn't really matter, because you guys are here to, like, comment, share, and subscribe. And I'm going to be genuine to you guys as possible. I'm going to be as genuine as possible. So try not to edit out any of my outros. Sometimes I do that like very lightly, but other than that, I don't know. I just figure, it's going to be the most genuine I can possibly be to you guys if I just act like that. So, anyway, guys, comment, like, share this video as you want, do whatever you want, and I'll see you in the next video.